Right, guys. So we're coming back at you with another tier list. My last tier list video did pretty good, so I figured I'd do another one of these. This is a spell tier list. As you can see, what I went ahead and did is I put the striking spells like the smites and whatnot. I think there's like ensnaring strike and stuff like that. I'm gonna go ahead and just or like well, magic whip I could say. I'm gonna go ahead and just like put them all in striking spells because I mean they're all good, and that's not really what we're talking about here. Honestly, we're talking about uh really like actual spells, because I mean with these you're just hitting something. I mean in snaring strike, they also get stuck, so I mean that's good. All of these are amazing, obviously. Where's Divine Smite? I don't, I don't know. I guess Divine Smite isn't in here, but yeah. So anyway, we're going to be ranking all of these spells. Some of these are cantrips. And the way that this is going to work is I'm going to take the cost of that spell into consideration. So, like, for example, how good is Blight for what it cost you, right? Blight is a level 4 spell, right? So, is it worth, the level 4 spell slot, right? I'm also going to be taking into account the class that you have to go to get the spell and how good is that class, right? What you have to do to get the spell is going to take into effect how good it actually is. All right, so let's get started uh with our first D tier. Acid Splash, it's a cantrip. I can think of 5 different cantrips that are better cantrips. Yeah, that's all that really needs. Aid, S tier. Gives you permanent health boost. Um, you can use a level 6 spell slot on it. There's ways when you get to the later parts of the game, this can give you, I believe it's 25 health. It's either 25 or 20 if you use a level 6 spell slot. I believe it's 25, but if it's not, it's 20, right? Either way, huge. It's a huge difference, right? You can take a character that has 100 health and make them 120. Huge. And then you can recover that spell slot. So you just get that free boost. You need to have someone in your party who can cast aid up to that level. Um, I would say so. I would say that's almost mandatory. Animal friendship, uh, it can be useful. Honestly, though, if you're fighting enemies, if you're anything like me, if you have this spell on you, I mean, like, you're not even gonna think about it, but it can be useful. I'm not gonna go D tier because it's not as bad as something like Acid Splash. I could see this being useful. Could even be really good, but yeah. Animate Dead. This might be controversial, but I'm only gonna put it in B tier. I feel like the zombies and whatnot in this game just aren't very good. Um, Now you can make a lot of them, right? And that can be pretty good, but honestly, I don't think it's that good. Now, Arcane Gate. Is that do they mean Dimension Door? No, okay, so that's a separate thing. All right, so I actually don't know what the spell is. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Um, so it's just gonna go automatically in B tier because I honestly don't know it. I'm gonna Google it. I'm gonna Google it we're gonna pause the recording. All right, I'm back, guys. Yeah, so basically it does something very similar to Dimension Door. You basically just make a portal from one place to the other. That sounds incredible. I've never used that spell. I've played the entire game as a wizard before. Never seen that spell. So yeah. But from what I've read on it, that seems very, very strong. Seems like a Misty Step, kind of, but very uprated. So yeah. Arcane Lock, C tier. I'm sure there's scenarios where that could come in handy, but honestly, guys, never ran into a scenario that really just I was like, man, I wish I had arcane lock. That's never happened to me personally, but maybe I'm just a little uncreative. Armor of Agathis. It's an easy A tier. Punishing enemies for hitting you. I mean, come on, easy A tier. Arms of Hadar. This is really good spell early game. It falls off towards the later part of the game. We're gonna go B tier. This is definitely better than Animate Dead, that's for sure. Same thing like Armor Gath. This is gonna be better than yeah. Oh yeah, I mean Arms of Adar is really good early game, but it just falls off. You can upcast it to like a level six, but if you upcast it to level six, your damage output that you're getting is just not as good as something that you would use at a level six spell slot. So you just really, it is good. Like if you were in a situation where you wanted to disengage, right? That's where this spell shines, right? Because you can do damage and disengage if they fail that saving throw, and that is the caveat there. That's the thing that holds this back because it's not guaranteed that they will fail that saving throw, and then they can still opportunity attack you when you go to get away. And there's other ways to avoid opportunity attacks. So, like killing them outright, right? So, Artistry of War. Now, this spell is incredible, right? If you don't know, this is basically a magic missile on steroids. But problem with this spell is number one, you basically have to be a wizard unless you're gaming the system a little bit. Um, and wizards can be very, very good, right? But this is also a level six spell. And I don't know if it's. I'm going to give it an A tier. Now, obviously, this is one of the highest damaging spells in the entire game, right? But it's level six. So, I just don't feel like for the cost of a level six spell slot, you really just super, super get your money worth for it. Um, but yeah, Bane is our next spell. B tier. It costs an action to do it, right? You're basically doing the opposite of Bless. Um, it's pretty good, but it quickly falls off. And the fact that it costs you an action, it makes you feel like, would I be better off just attacking? And for my experience, I feel like you're better off just attacking. But yeah, banishment. Banishment is pretty good. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. But the problem with banishment is compared to something like hold monster or dominate person or where's it at hold person. The problem with this versus that is it just takes them off the battlefield, right? Whereas if you cast hold monster or hold person, you can still attack them, right? But they can't attack you. So banishment is good, right? But I feel like the enemies that you would really want to do this to, that can really mess up your party and do insane amounts of damage, are probably going to pass this saving throw. So for that reason, I'm going to put it in C tier. Now, that might be controversial. You could put it in B tier. But I just feel like there's better options that do a similar thing, but you can still hurt them. Bark skin. C tier. I feel like so you're gonna get this with a druid. Um, and with a druid, you're really not. Probably not going to be using this much. I mean, it depends on the wild shape. We'll put it in B tier because okay. So I'm pretty sure that your Barksin AC carries over with you into your wild shape. Um, but that's if I think this gives you. Hold up, we're gonna look it up real quick. All right, it's a good thing I looked that up because it's actually giving you 16 AC, which is that's pretty huge. But I feel like a lot of the times, a lot of your wild shapes might have that AC anyway. So I'm gonna keep that at B tier. I feel like there's better options. It is a concentration spell, so that's why I can't really put that at an A or an S tier. But it is pretty good. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Beacon of Hope. It's gonna be a B tier. Bestow Curse. Yeah, B tier. Blade Barrier. Honestly, C tier because for the cost that it is, there's just better options. I would never find myself using that over some of the better spells that you can cast at the same level. You know, Blade War. Now, I'm gonna put this in A tier because the cost of the spell is nothing other than an action, and early game that's gonna be really really good for you guys. Blade Ward. I mean, it gives a flat damage reduction. I mean, come on, bless. It's gonna be a B tier. For the same reasons that Bane is a B tier, B is a B tier. Bless is a B tier. Blight. For being a level 4 spell, does a pretty insane amount of damage. I'm gonna give it an A tier. Yeah. I mean, for being level 4, it's a pretty good spell. Blindness. Blindness, if I remember correctly, is a level 2 spell, and it is very good. It blinds your enemies, right? Gives them disadvantage and whatnot. For me, that's going to be a B tier because at level 2, you can also get Hold Person, and Hold Person gives you guaranteed critical hits. Now, that doesn't mean that blindness is a useless spell, but there's just better options, and that's why it's going to B tier. Now, it's also a level 2 spell, so it's pretty cheap for the effect that you get. Not gonna lie, guys. Blink, C tier. Uh, I mean, you take yourself off the battlefield. To me, it's just okay, I guess. You know. All right. Blur makes you harder to hit. It's pretty good. C tier. And keep in mind, guys, C tier and up, none of these spells are like C tier is not useless. Even D, like Acid Splash, is not awful, right? Matter of fact, we are going to add a row below, and we are going to change the color to bright green, and we are gonna make a tier called trash tier. Um, I don't know if any spells will be going there, but we'll have it. We'll have it ready if we need it. Bone chill. Now, this is a very situational spell. Well, cantrip actually. If you have an enemy that is just constantly healing, it's really good, right? Because now they can't heal. So I'm going to give Bone Chill an easy A tier. It's also a cantrip, so it costs nothing but your action to cast. To me, that's pretty amazing. Burning Hands does okay damage. C tier. You know, does okay damage. It's a lower level spell. It's gonna be basically useless at the end of the game. Now, yeah, this is an easy S tier. Now, this is probably the most controversial potentially, because you might be saying to yourself, "Oh, it doesn't even do that much damage." Okay, guys, this is a concentration spell that you can potentially goes all the way up to 40 damage, right, at level 3. Then if you can cast water on them, then it can go all the way up to 80 damage. And if you're a Tempest Domain Cleric, you can use Destructive Wrath to guarantee that you're going to get the maximum damage. Yeah, Call Lightning is potentially one of the best spells in the game. Period. Even in late game, you're going to be using this spell in Act 3. Unless your enemies have lightning resistance, which there's really only one uh, really big enemy that has lightning resistance. I mean, there's others, like Grim and whatnot, but yeah, it's not super common to run into enemies that are resistant to lightning. So it's one of the best spells in the game, easily. Calm Emotions, C tier. Um, it's great for what it does if you need it. But I feel like most of your party, especially later in the game, it's not going to be easy for them to get frightened. Uh, in Act 3, I believe it's going to be impossible if you have a certain spell that you cast at the beginning. But yeah, we'll get to that whenever we get to it. Chain Lightning, S tier. I mean, it's one of the highest damaging spells in the game, and you can combo it with water. Yeah, I mean, honestly, if you're going to use a level 6 spell, I think this is the best one. Honestly, I think this is the best level 6 spell. Damaging level 6 spell. It's not the best level 6 spell. We'll get to that. But Charm Person, C tier. It's not as good as Hold Person. Costs the same. Yeah. Chromatic Orb, A tier. For versatility, Chromatic Orb is an easy A tier. You can choose whatever damage type in the game. So you will be I will be picking this spell up a lot on my casters, right? Because if you run into an enemy that is resistant to everything but I don't know, like cold damage, right? They're resistant to everything but cold damage. Well, guess what? Chromatic Orb can be cold damage, and you can upcast it to whatever level you want. You can use this level 6, level 1. That's one of the best spells in the game. If I mean, especially from when you get it, you can get it at like level 3 or level 2. It's super versatile. Like if I have a caster, especially early game, they're going to have Chromatic Orb. It's just for the versatility. Circle of Death, A tier. It's great for what it is, but it suffers from the same problem that Artistry of War does. There's just better spells for the cost. Cloud Kill. A tier for sure. Cloud Kill is definitely an A tier. You can reposition the cloud. It's a huge AoE. Does pretty good damage. It's not as crazy as something like Chain Lightning, um, or like Fireball, for example. But it's just sustained damage that I don't believe they can even see out of it. So I mean, it's just a super good spell. The only problem is it's such a big AOE. It can be difficult for your other allies to make a move on the people that are inside the cloud without also getting damaged. So Cloud of Daggers A tier, especially early game. You can cast this at level 2. It hurts them at the beginning of their turn, and it also hurts them when you cast it on them. It's just a super good spell. It's going to be one of your best AoE spells early on, for sure. Color Spray, D tier. Yeah, it's a beam. It's not trash. You can use it, but very mid. Command, A tier. You can cast this level 1. Level 1 spell slot. You can cast Command. You can basically make them go prone with the grovel. You can make them drop their weapon. Um, it's just honestly, you could even make the argument to put Command in S tier. Honestly, you really could. Like, it's easily the best spell in A tier for sure. Yeah, for sure. And I'm not keeping like super good order of these. I'm just kind of going through it. But Pale Duel, E tier, I guess. I mean, the reason why this isn't super useful is because 9 times out of 10 you're going to be fighting more than one enemy, right? So let's say one of your party members is weak, right, and you want to make sure that they hit you. Well, yeah, they're also going to get hit by the other ones. Now, if you're making a super purpose built build where you're like an abjuration wizard and you have armor of the Vagastus and whatnot, and you cast compel duel so that they hit you, then all right, I see where that works, right? But it's just super niche. So for most people, it's going to be like a B tier. Cone of Cold, easy A tier, easy. It's a very strong spell. Very strong spell, especially if you combo it with water. Super strong spell. Confusion, honestly, C tier. There's better spells that do a very similar thing. Conjure Barrage. Um, right. So Conjure Barrage is basically very similar to something like Cloud of Daggers, right? But it's not a sustained AoE, right? And you also have to be a ranger to get it. And I'm going to say this, ranger is not one of your best classes, especially if you're not multi-classing. So it's going to go in C tier. Um, it's not bad at all, but if we're taking into account that you have to go a ranger to get it, you start to, yeah. Conjure Elemental, S tier. I mean, with the Water Myrmidon, you can get healing vapors and you can make targets wet, which you can really combo that in with stuff like this. Uh, Conjure Elemental, one of the best games, one of the best spells in the game, easily. Conjure Minor Elemental uh, is gonna go into A tier. I know that it's cheaper. It's like only a level 4, but they're just not as good. Now, they're still very good because they're an extra body, right, on the battlefield, which is needed, right? Just to tank some shots, but not as good. Conjure Woodland Bee, S tier. Now, for those of you who don't know, you might be saying to yourself, what is he talking about? But this is easily an S tier. The reason why is it has so much great synergies with your druid. Now, this can make it to where if you cast like plant growth and spike growth and whatnot, which you definitely will be, right? All of your party can go through that terrain easily. So this gives you the potential to have one of the best CC builds in the game using this spell. And for that reason, it is an easy S tier. Easily. Contagion, it's fun. Not that good. Especially for what it costs. Counterspell. A tier. It only casts level 3. You can shut down enemy player spells as a reaction. If it costs a level 2 spell slot, I would think it'd be an easy S tier. The problem with Counterspell is a lot of times you would rather, like when you first get it, you would rather use those level 3 spell slots to do damage, right? Now it depends on what the that is coming back at you is. Like, if you see if they cast Fireball, it's like, well, I might want to counter that to shut that down, right? Or if they cast Hold Person on you and you know you don't have good Wisdom, well, all right, let's cast a Counterspell. But and then the problem with it late game is for whatever reason they'll just tank through the Counterspell and the spell will still work. So but it is good. I would recommend running it. I really would, but it's not an S tier. Some people would put it in S tier. Greater Destroy Water, S tier, easily, easy S tier. It costs basically nothing, you know, to cast it, and you can double your damage with all lightning and cold spells. How is that not an S tier? Easily an S tier. Great Undead, B tier. Yeah, I mean the undead just aren't as good as the elementals and the woodland beings. That doesn't mean that they're useless. Um, but yeah, they're just not as good. Crown of Madness. It's better than Charm Person and Confusion, but it's not as good as some of my other spells. Crusader's Mantle. Yeah, I mean, C tier. It buffs your party, but I believe they have to be close. Hold on. And also, you're gonna get this on your Paladin, and you're better off 9 times out of 10 just attacking than casting something like this. Also, I believe it's a concentration spell. And with your paladin, there's a decent chance you're going to get your concentration broken because your feats aren't going to be, you know, focused on keeping concentration. They're probably going to be focused on putting out damage, and you're going to be in the front line, so you're going to be getting hit a lot. Yeah, not super great. Cure wounds, D tier. Healing word's better. You have to touch the person to heal them. And there's other healing spells that are very similar to cure wounds, but they heal more. So yeah, D tier. That one's the first one that's going in the trash. I don't I don't see the point in dancing lights. Maybe I'm bad. I don't see the point in it. What's the point in having dancing lights? Like it's a cantrip, sure, but you don't stay in one area. And this is just lighting up an area. I don't get it. Like, why not just cast light? Where is light? I don't see light, but anyway. Yeah, I mean, light's just better. It sticks with you. Dancing light's garbage. Useless. Darkness. Uh, I mean, go with B tier, but darkness can be an easy A tier or even an S tier if you build around it. So let's say for whatever reason you build a party, then this would be crazy. You would have to have an entire party of multi-classed warlocks, right? So warlock and then something else, which would be crazy. But they would all have devil sight, right? That's the key thing here. If they all had devil sight, then you could use darkness, right? And darkness can still be really good if like you just have one person, right, who is a warlock of some type. Because then they can just stand in the center of it and it's very hard for other people to hit them. But it's kind of a niche spell. Now, for that reason, it's going to go in B tier. But you could easily put it in S and A if you truly build your build around it. Dark Vision, D tier. Almost every, I mean, it's just, yeah, roleplay thing. It's just like if you're the main character, you're gonna have dark vision. Simple as. And most of the companions even have dark vision, I believe. And if you don't have dark vision, you can just use a cantrip, not a spell, to cast light. And voila, you can look. You can see. Daylight is a pretty good spell. If you have a build centered around like radiating orb and stuff, it can be A and B tier, A or B tier. Otherwise, it's kind of like a C tier. Death Ward, great spell. Cost level 4. If your ally goes down, they basically get picked back up for free, um, like automatically. It's pretty good, but you could also just do that with a bonus action and not have to use a level 4 spell slot. Um, so, like, if you just cast Healing Word on them, it basically does the same thing. But it still has its uses. Destructive Wave. Um, Honestly, it's going to be a B tier because you get this in, I believe, the only place you get this is from being a Tempest Domain Cleric. And there's just better spells as a Tempest Domain Cleric that are more worth your action than Destructive Wave. So, but it can be good if you're just surrounded by enemies. Tech thoughts. It's gonna go in B tier too, just because. I mean, you just use it in dialogue. You don't really need it. It does help in some dialogues, but the way that the game is built, you don't have to have it. So I'm not gonna put it in. I'm just gonna put it dead in the center just for that reason. Dethrone, B tier. There's just better spells that cost the same. Like I would even say Circle of Death and Artistry of War are better than Dethrone. But Dethrone's not bad. Dimension Door, A tier. Basically it's a Misty Step, but for you and a companion that's next to you. I mean, it's just great. It's situational. You're not always going to use it. You're not going to use it every combat encounter, but it's good. Sky Self, B tier. You don't have to use it, but like especially early game, you can go in certain areas and have disguise self. You know, make yourself a drow and then go into the goblin camp, stuff like that. It'll help you out. Disintegrate. Uh, Now I would say you could put it in S tier, but I just truly believe Chain Lightning is better. Like out of the damaging spells, Chain Lightning is the best. But I'm gonna put it in S tier because I don't believe basically nothing has any resistance to force damage. Like if you're fighting something that has resistance to almost everything, they're not going to be resistant to force damage. Nothing is really coming to mind. Like even Grim is not resistant to force damage. So, and with a sorcerer, well, with a sorcerer, you can actually win this. So it'd be pretty insane. I'm going to put it in S tier. Spell evil and good. B tier. Dissonant Whispers. A tier. You can basically, so on top of doing psychic damage, and you do a pretty good amount of damage. This is like you can cast this as a level one, but you can also cast it as like level two, three, four, and so on. Right? You do pretty decent damage, and if they fail the Wisdom saving throw, they also will have the Fear effect, which means they can't move. Right? And they also, I think they also have disadvantage. But yeah, it's a solid spell. You get it from the you get it when you go a bard, and bard's is the best class in the game. I'm not gonna say one of, it's the best class for a main character. Best class, hands down. Divine favor. I believe you can pass divine favor as a bonus action. Let me check. So yes, it is a bonus action to cast. So that is gonna put it. No, I'm gonna keep it in B tier because it's only 1 to 4 damage more. And a lot of times you might be better off using that bonus action to just heal yourself. So yeah, B tier. Dominate person. It's gonna go into A tier. Basically, you can make a person fight for you. Now it does cost a lot, but that is pretty huge. Um, Eldritch Blast, S tier. It's cantrip, best cantrip in the game. S tier. If you know, you know. Elemental weapon. C tier, very mid. Enhanced ability, A tier, especially for honor mode. Definitely need this. Gives you an advantage on a certain, like if it can be charisma, strength, just an ability score basically. So, and it's lasts until long rest or until they lose their concentration. So let's say you go into the goblin camp, right? Like I just have on my honor mode playthrough. Whoever can cast enhanced ability on you, right? You can have another party member do what's it called? Guidance, right? And this enhanced ability will last until long rest or they lose concentration. So you can do all of your dialogue in an area and not have to recast this. And it only costs a level 2 spell slot, which is expensive early in the game. But later in the game, I mean, that's nothing. A level 2 spell slot is nothing. So, enhanced sleep, uh, it's good. It's good for getting around. It's a ritual spell outside of combat. So, yeah, it's just super useful. Enlarge, A tier. So if you guys didn't know, you can enlarge one of your allies, right? And they'll actually do more damage. So that being said, and if they're an hour bearer, they can come from the top rope, enlarged, and the game thinks they weigh more, right? Which they do, because I guess because they're enlarged. But yeah, it's A tier spell. Entangle, it's gonna be an A tier. It's very similar to what's it called? Whole person. But the difference is in Tangle, they have to do a strength saving throw, not a wisdom saving throw. So, and most of the enemies that you're gonna fight are gonna have high strength. Um, so that is a little bit problematic. So yeah, enthrall, trash. Basically, it doesn't even work the way it's supposed to. Never use this spell. If Ard's Black Tentacles. B tier. It's a solid spell. Expeditious Retreat. Uh, depending on who you ask, this could be an A tier, but I don't do much running, so B tier. I bite B tier. It's not worth the spell slot. It's definitely not worth the spell slot. This is a level 6 spell or level 5. I can't remember, but either way, it's not worth even a level 5. Fairy Fire, A tier. Early game, this is a huge spell. Huge spell. Because though in an AoE, and a pretty big one at that, you can cast it, and if they don't succeed throw, then your all attacks against that target will have advantage. That is huge, especially if you have a rogue in your party. Huge, huge. False life, B tier. I don't find myself using this very much. Um, it's all right. It's not great. It's not terrible. Fear. Fear is a great spell. Basically, you can make them drop their weapon and run away. That's huge. Huge. Featherfall. For same reason that we're putting enhanced sleep. Basically, all of our little like spells like that are just gonna go with B tier. Um, yeah. Feign death. So I'm gonna put this in A tier because if you guys didn't know, you can actually cast this on a vendor and steal all their stuff. Yeah. So yeah, it's a pretty useful spell. Find familiar, D tier. It's not that great. Yeah. Fireball, B tier. It's a cantrip. Doesn't do as much damage as something like Eldritch Blast. But it can definitely be useful, and it can be useful to set things on fire, like grease and whatnot. Oh, I got confused. Okay, yeah, this is Fireball. A tier. Do a lot of damage with a good Fireball. It's just a pretty decent sized AoE that does pretty decent damage. This is going to be a very major spell for you in mid game. So yeah, it's a good spell. Firebolt. This is I just gave the explanation for why it's here. So fire shield. Uh, it's going to go in A tier for the same reason that Armor of Gathis. So with fire shield, and I'm assuming this is not two separate things. You can also make this a cold shield, and you can stack it with Armor of Gathis. So for the same reason that Armor of Gathis is here, fire shield's here. Flame strike. B tier. So you get this from clerics, and I feel like you have better options um, for the spell slot. Flame sword, B tier. Flaming spear. Now, this is pretty great early game. This is pretty amazing, actually, early game, especially if you're a druid. You can cast this and then wild shape. The only problem with it is it costs concentration, so you have to be careful to not get your concentration broken or this disappears. But it does sustained damage. I mean, it's pretty incredible for the game. Quickly falls off to being basically useless in the end game, but for as good as it is in early game and as cheap as it is, it's a level 2 spell slot. It's going in A tier. Flesh to stone, trash. They're almost always going to succeed the throw. Garbage. Fly, it's going into the B tier. Fog cloud. Fog cloud works almost identically to darkness. I really don't even know the difference, honestly. It's basically the same thing. Freedom of the movement, A tier. So what you guys can do is like if you have a druid and let's say you don't have conjure, actually, I think you get this at the same point. But either way, even if you're not running a druid or some point, you can actually, if you have like let's say a huge ice surface, right? You can cast freedom of movement, and then they can't fall prone. They can just walk right over it. It's not difficult terrain. It's a pretty good spell. It's situational. You're not going to use it every single encounter, but it's a solid spell. Friends. B tier. This is useless in honor mode. I wouldn't even use it in honor mode, but it's a good cantrip. Gaseous form. Um, Pretty good. You can use it to get in pretty good places. Make yourself harder to hit. Pretty solid spell. Global invulnerability. S tier. Easily. Easily an S tier. Yeah, no questions about that. It's S tier. So basically, you can be invulnerable in the sphere and shoot out of it. Come on. That's an insane spell, guys. You can also heal in it. So if you need 3 turns to completely heal yourself back up, Clover invulnerability. Huge spell. Glyph of Warding. This could easily go in S tier, but I'm going to put it in A tier. It's an AoE spell. Uh, it's also has the same thing that Chromatic Orb does. You know what? Fuck it. I'm putting it in S tier. I don't care. It's an S tier. It's AoE. It does the same thing that Chromatic Orb does, where you can choose your damage type, which is huge. Huge. And it's AoE. And a big AoE at that. It's great. And you can upcast it. It's huge. Uh yeah. Trash. Grease is gonna be a solid B tier. It's a really good spell. Falls off quickly though. Falls off quickly. Easy A tier. Easy A tier. Yeah. Greater invisibility. I mean, if you have a what's it called? A rogue, this can be really insane. And you can also cast Pass Without Trace, and then it just becomes insane. Really insane. Greater Restoration, B tier. Guardian of Faith, B tier. Yeah, I mean it's a pretty good spell. It's not amazing. Guidance, A tier. Guiding Bolt. Um B tier. Same reasons Guardian's Faith. I mean it's pretty good. It does pretty good damage. It's not insane. Gust of Wind, C tier. It can be useful in certain situations. Yeah. Hail of Thorns. For the same reason that Conjure Barrage is here, Hail of Thorns is going to be here. You have to be a ranger to get it. Not super good. Harm. Um, Actually, B tier. I just think there's better spells for spell slot. Harm is pretty expensive for what it is, honestly. Haste. S tier in most of the modes. If you were considering this purely from a honor mode perspective, it would only be in like an A tier. But because we're looking at this, it's not just honor mode, but all of the modes. And since honor mode is just one out of what 4, uh, it's 75% of the modes. This is the best spell, one of the best spells in the game, if not the best spell in the game. And it only costs a level 3 spell slot. I mean, that's pretty insane. Heal, yeah, trash. Um, that's a level. What level spell is the? Yeah, so heal is actually a level 6 spell. Um, and for me, like no, no, you're not using a level 6 spell for healing. We're not doing that, guys. Healing word, S tier. You need this on at least one party member, if not two. This can pick up an ally, and obviously heal them as well. So when they get picked up, they also have at least like 10 hit points, depending on like. And if you're a life domain cleric casting just a level one healing word, it's pretty insane. But once they get picked up, then they'll have their bonus action, right? And then they can heal themselves with a potion once they're picked up. So healing word, S tier. S tier spell for sure. Heat metal, A tier. It's pretty great for what it is early game. Um, Basically, you make it to where they can drop their weapon, and if they're wearing armor, then they just keep getting burned. It's pretty great. It does require concentration though, and that's what holds it back from being something like an S tier. But yeah, because I mean, there's just so many good concentration spells that I don't know if heat metal is as good as some of the other ones. Hellish Rebuke. It's gonna be an A tier. But being able to dish out damage back to enemies that hit you is always going to be good. It does cost a spell slot though, and towards the end of the game, this is basically useless. But early to mid game, this is a pretty good spell. It's a solid spell. Heroism, B tier. Very situational, not super useful. Hero's Feast. This is what I was looking for earlier. S tier. So not only do you get a huge health boost from this, they're also immune to being. Let me look at everything just so I can briefly list it off. All right, so here it is, guys. This spell allows spellcasters to summon a bountiful smorgasbord to bolster themselves and their allies and strengthen their resolve. You and everyone, so everyone around, right? Everyone who takes, benefits from the feast, all of your allies, cannot be poisoned, diseased, or frightened. That's insane. That's such a huge buff. So none of those effects can harm you at all. Plus, you also get a increase by 12, and you make wisdom saving throws with advantage. I mean, if that's not one of the best spells in the game, what is? I mean, and not only that, but you also get camp supplies. So even if you didn't get the camp supplies from it, it would be one of the best spells in the game. Easily. Easily. It's S tier. Hex. Hex is a easy A tier. Um, so early game, this is going to be incredible. Um, Late game, not so much. But not only, so what you can do with Hex is if you cast Hex on an opponent, and you'll probably have Eldritch Blast if you have Hex. Um, when you cast your Eldritch Blast, you're going to deal additional damage, right? But you can also Hex that enemy's Wisdom, right? And then your Bard or whoever can cast something like Hold Person, and then it makes it easier for them to succeed that throw. Hex is just incredible. Incredible. Hold Monster. S tier. This can turn some of the major boss fights into a trivial matter, honestly. Especially if you have something like Hold Monster and Global Invulnerability going into it. I mean, Raphael can be extremely easy with Hold Monster and Global Invulnerability. Like, it can be stupid easy. You wouldn't even necessarily need Global Invulnerability, but if you have Hold Monster, I mean, how do you lose? Yeah. All you all you need is a character properly set up to where they're almost certainly going to succeed that throw. And yeah, then he's held. Then you can, with your paladin, go over there and get the free crits. And then if they're hasted, oh boy. Especially on Tactician, oh my gosh. Because then you can have 4 smites that are all going to crit. But if you're not, then you're Not in honor mode. I think you just get three. So, but either way, it's insane. Hold person, for the same reason that hold monster is, it's going to be an S tier. But honestly, hold person is even better because a lot of your enemies are going to be humanoids, right? But also, this only costs a level 2 spell slot, guys. It's insane. Hunger of Hadar, easy A tier. It's a great spell. So it's a huge AoE. It does damage. They're also in darkness, so you get this from the Warlock subclass or class. Um, and you're probably gonna have Devil Sight if you went Warlock, if you did it right anyway. So you'll also be able to see into it and still hit the people that are in it, where they have disadvantage trying to shoot anything out of it. Pretty huge. It's a great spell. Hunter's Mark, yeah, not useless, not great. Hypnotic Pattern is a great spell. This can trivialize certain encounters. One that comes to mind for me is the encounter where you have to protect a portal outside of Last Light Inn while, Halsin's in there doing his thing. Uh, if you cast Hypnotic Pattern, you're going to hit a huge area of effect on all of those massive amount of enemies. And most of them are, for whatever reason, are going to fail this Hypnotic Pattern saving throw. And so they just can't do anything. You can really, honestly, you could even put Hypnotic Pattern in your S tier. Because, I mean, if you're fighting a lot of enemies, you can make it to where they just can't do anything to you. And you can just take them out one by one. Another encounter where this would be really good is like when you're in Cazador's house and you have to fight all of those werewolves. You cast this in there, and most of the room is going to fail that throw, and then you just take them out one by one. Very, 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 very strong spell. You could easily put this in S tier. Easily. Ice Knife, A tier. It's a good spell. You can cast it from 1 to 6. Does ice damage, which, you know, can benefit from Great Water, right? And also puts a thing of ice at their feet. So then they might actually trip on that ice and be prone. Pretty solid spell. Ice Storm, A tier. Honestly, though, the problem with Ice Storm and why you might even put it in B tier is Ice Storm is honestly too big of an area of effect. Uh, so, like, I find myself not casting Ice Storm much because it's just so big, and I don't want to hit my allies too. And also, you know, I don't want my allies to have to walk on that ice. Now, later in the game, you get tons of stuff to where stuff like that doesn't. You don't have to worry about going prone. There's tons of items that can prevent that, right? But it's still pretty good. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. Inflict wounds, A tier. It's a great spell. Great, great spell. Um, when you are early game cleric and you need to put a lot of damage on a target, this is going to be one of your go-to spells. It is basically a melee range spell. So, honestly, I don't know why Guiding Bolt's down here. It's an A tier. Guiding Bolt is an A tier too, because for so much of the game, your cleric, this is going to be their bread and butter. And the thing about Guiding Bolt is it doesn't do as much damage as Inflict Wounds, but it gives your the next attack on that target advantage. So if you have a paladin, okay, now you make it more likely they'll actually crit. Incredible. It's a great spell. Inflict Wounds is great too, just for the sheer damage it can do, even at level 1. Even at level 1 Inflict Wounds, it's going to be pretty insane. Insect Plague, A tier. It's a great spell. It suffers from similar side effects that Ice Storm does. It's honestly a little bit too big, or it feels that way. Um, and those enemies that are in it, you can't go in and hurt them. right? So you just have to wait for them to die in there, basically. But it is a great spell. It's great. It definitely deserves A tier. Invisibility. Regular invisibility is kind of no, it deserves A tier. It deserves A tier. Great spell. Tons of utility. Knock. Just for the utility, it's going in A tier. Lesser restoration, B tier. Honestly, I don't find myself using it a whole lot. It is valuable to have, you know, and most clerics are going to have this automatically, but if they don't, it's worth picking it up. Having a cleric, at least one party member with both greater and lesser restoration, and like remove curse and stuff like that, just in case something like that comes up and you need to deal with it. But you're not going to be using that spell very much. Light, A tier. Now, light is a cantrip, doesn't cost anything. And in certain areas of the game where you need light, this is the best lighting spell for me. You can cast this on your weapon, right? And now you're just lit up constantly. Oh, your character doesn't have dark vision? Light. Now you can see. It's that simple. Light's just coded like that. Lightning arrow, B tier. You have to be a ranger to get it. Um, but I would imagine it's pretty good, with water and whatnot. It's pretty good combos you can get out of it. But lightning bolt, A tier. It's not as good as call lightning and chain lightning, just because it's that weird straight line. But it benefits from the same things that these two would. You know, great water. It's just not as good. Long Strider. I'm tempted to put this in S tier, honestly, but it's not a huge boost. I'm gonna put it in S tier because honestly, especially early game, I mean, you're gonna use it all the way to the end of the game, but it doesn't cost you anything, and it's just a permanent. It's just a buff that you put on your party for free. And if you don't have at least someone who could put Long Strider on your party, um, I feel like you're kind of doing it wrong. I feel like you need at least someone who can cast this on the whole party. Mage armor, very mid, very mid. I think this only brings your armor up to 13. If I'm wrong, let me know down in the comments, of course. But yeah, it's just not super great. Mage hand, um, great cantrip, a lot of utilities. People who are more creative than myself could probably find better uses than this. Also, if you're into like just kind of cheesing the game, this is your spell right here. But yeah, it's a pretty great spell. It's a cantrip. Doesn't cost anything. Magic missile. S tier. And one of the reasons why magic missile is so good is there are a select few of encounters, right, where this is going to be your go-to spell. Auntie Ethel comes to mind. You are going to need someone with magic missile for that encounter in auto mode. I mean, at least it's going to make it way easier. Because she has those clones that only have 1 or 2 health, right? And you can take those out with the magic missile. You can take several of them out in one turn. That's huge. Also, Raphael comes to mind. You can take out all the pillars with magic missile very easily. Um, because those are vulnerable to force damage. Because it's a force damage spell, very few things can resist it. Certain things are going to be weak to it. It always hits for at least 1 damage, right? Each little node of it. You can upcast it as high as you want. There are builds that completely revolve around Magic Missile. And some of those builds can get you some of the most insane damage that there is in the game. Magic Missile is an easily S tier. Easy. Magic Weapon, C tier. Same reason that Elemental Weapon is. I just don't find myself using it very much. Mass Cure Wounds. Um, E tier. It costs a level 5 spell slot to do, and the area of effect is not huge, and the healing is not huge. I wouldn't say it's useless. Like, if you have a life domain cleric, this is probably pretty good. But you're also going to have Preserve Life. So, Preserve Life is going to be better than this. And if you're down to the point where you've already used Preserve Life, and I mean, yeah, things probably aren't looking too good for you. Yeah, I just don't think it's that good. No, Safsadero. It's alright. Minor Illusion. Now, this is a weird spell because it all depends on how you play the game. Um, if you play the game in a way where every encounter is like, all right, let me set up some crazy trap, right? Then this can easily be an S tier spell. Um, and matter of fact, because I know those people exist, Minor Illusion is going in S tier. Now, me personally, I don't really use Minor Illusion. Um, I'm not using Minor Illusion to like set guys up and do that. Now you can. There's nothing wrong with it. I'm not even saying it's cheesy because it's not. It's a cheesy is like putting like 50 explosive barrels in front of something before the combat starts and blowing them up. That's cheesy, right? Yeah, if you don't really play that way, then I mean, depending on how you play, Minor Illusion could be trash, or it could be S tier. So it really just depends on how you play. Um, Mirror Image. Now, it's gonna go in B tier, but I will say Mirror Image for a Druid can easily be an A tier because this effect will go into your Wild Shape. If you cast this and then Wild Shape, it will go into it. So, but otherwise, it's B tier. Misty Step. S tier. Only costs a level 2 spell slot, teleport anywhere you want. Great spell. If your entire party has Misty Step, it's fantastic. Moonbeam. Um, B tier. It's not super great. I think you get this from one or two clerics, and then the druid. You get it. If you get it from the clerics, you probably have better spells, right? If you get it with the druid, you can't move the note while you're in wild shape, so you can't move the beam, which is pretty useless. But it's not terrible. You can still make it work. Uh, but yeah. Uh, this is pretty good. It's basically like an ice bomb. A tier. It just costs so much. I think this is like a 5 or a 6 level spell. Uh, Now, this is a great spell, but it's not global invulnerability great. For that reason, we're going to put it in A tier. It does something very similar. So basically, you encase a target um, to where they can't be hit, but their movement speed is severely crippled. So yeah. Otto's Irresistible Dance. I'm gonna put it in A tier, and that's gonna piss some people off, but it's great, but it's expensive. It's very, very expensive. Pass Without Trace. An easy A tier. This combined with greater invisibility on a rogue can be absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. So this basically just makes it buffs your stealth by like plus 10. And then if you're greater invisibility, you basically are not going to fail that throw for a very long time. You basically can just stay invisible if you're already someone who has high stealth. And then you have plus 10 on top of it. So, like, if you had plus 7, now you have plus 17. So, yeah, you're going to stay invisible and always have advantage. It's insane. Phantasmal Force, C tier, not that great. Phantasmal Killer, not that great. C tier. Planar Ally. Uh, yeah, we're gonna give it an S tier. Um, if you combine Planar Ally, well, you know what? We're not gonna give it an S tier because, well, we are gonna give it an S tier. It's not as good as Conjure Elemental or Conjure Woodland Being, but if you conjure like the Diva, for example, and then if you conjure it and then do Hero's Feast and Aid, then you can have like a Diva with like 120 health or something stupid like that. Like, then they're just a tank, and your Diva can cast Revivify. So if one of your party members dies, I'll pick them up. Oh, one of your party members went down, pick them up. They have a lot of options, and they're just a tank, man. They're just a tank. They just tank so much damage. So yeah, it is a great spell. It's a very good use of a level 6 spell slot. Planar Binding. Not gonna lie to you guys, I feel like Hold Monster's just better. Sorry. Plant Growth. A tier spell. Great spell. Restricts their movement. If you have this and then with another character, cast Spike Growth, stuff starts to get insane. And then if you have the Conjure with Being, then your party members can go through there freely, while the other ones cannot. Pretty insane stuff. Poison Spray. Trash. Polymorph. Very funny spell. Uh, it's not as good as like Hold Monster and stuff. Sorry. But it is pretty good. Funny too. Prayer of the Feeling. Honestly, just just long rest or short rest. Spells that you can't use in combat. Produce Flame. B tier. Uh, it does what two others cantrips can do, but does neither of them as well. Like it does what the light cantrip and what the firebolt does, but neither is good. Eh. Protection from energy. Pretty good. Situational. Pretty good. Situational. Pretty good. Situational. Ray of Enfeeblement. Alright. Ray of Frost. This can be a pretty great cantrip if you want to keep enemies away from you. Ray of Sickness. C tier. Remove Curse. You're very rarely going to use this, but when you do need it. So, especially in Act 3, there's a few things where you will need this. But it's not, you're not using this to damage anyone. So, Resistance. B tier. It's basically like guidance, but much, much more situational. Revivify. Great spell. If one of your party members happens to die, well, cast a level 3 spell to bring them back to life. Pretty great. Sacred Flame, trash. It just never hits. It just never hits. This is more of a personal thing. It just never hits, guys. It never hits. Sanctuary, S tier. For level one spell, you can keep it. You can basically make a target immune to being targeted, right? So if you cast this on your healer, well, your healer can't be targeted by enemies until they hit something. So they can't deal out damage. But if you're in a situation where things are looking dire, right, you can cast this on a party member and they can just get out of there. They can't be hurt. Um, yeah. And if you have two people with Sanctuary, cast Sanctuary on yourself and Sanctuary on the other one, and you can just heal yourself. So, like, you can cast Sanctuary on yourself, and then they can cast Sanctuary on themselves. And if you had a theoretically, if you had an entire party with Sanctuary, they could just all cast Sanctuary on themselves. That they just can't be hit. And then you basically for four level ones, you have a global invulnerability, and then you can just heal yourselves and re-strategize, reposition. Pretty insane. Scorching Ray. Now, if you guys didn't know, there are some Scorching Ray builds that work very similar to Magic Missile builds. And oh my god, is the damage insane for some of those builds. Um, but because fire damage is one of the most commonly resisted types of damage, I don't think I can put it in S tier, but it's the easy A tier. Oh, we missed one. See invisibility. If you don't have the eye that you get from Volo, this would be useful, but 9 times out of 10, you're gonna have that. Seeming. Honestly, I can't even think of a single use case for this. Maybe I'm dumb, but this basically is disguise, but for your entire party. I think it's like a level 4 spell, which I don't know. I don't even know if you can cast it as a ritual spell, but yeah, I can't think of a single use case. Shatter. Um, this is an A tier. It's a small AoE. Does thunder damage, which is very uncommonly resistant. So yeah, I think it's pretty great. Shield. Easy S tier. Easily. As a reaction, you can increase your AC. Now, if you have something like this on an Eldritch Knight, you can, as a reaction, go from like 25 AC to 30. I mean, basically unhittable at that point. I mean, yeah. Shield of Faith, nah, yeah, it's not that great. Shillelagh, trash. Um, if you're a druid, you're not hitting stuff with your club. At least that's unlikely. Shocking Grass, B tier. I mean, I don't think it's worth the action to cost Shocking Grabs unless you're like level 2 or level 1. But uh, situational, I guess. Silence, A tier. Basically, you can shut down all spellcasters in an area. There are certain, like when you fight, what's his name? Uh, Balthazar. This could come in handy for sure. There's a lot of mages in that fight that do a lot of annoying things, or like when you fight, when you go into the Shar's place to complete Shadowheart's little quest line. There's a lot of people who like to cast darkness, so you could shut them down with a silence. It's got its use cases. Sleep. I'm gonna put it in B tier, but I'm gonna say At level 2, this is like the best spell in the game. But at like level 4, borderline useless. One of the steepest fall offs. Like, if you're looking at usefulness per level, it would look something like this: level 1 here, level 2 here, level 3. Just straight drop off. All right, Sleet Storm, C tier. I don't really think it's that good. Slow, C tier. I don't think it's that great. Speak with animals. That's going into the B tier. Useful. Don't need it. Speak with the dead. Useful. Don't need it. Spike growth. In the right combinations, this is a very great spell. Uh, if you have the Conjure Woodland Being to where your whole party can walk through this, it's pretty great. Spirit Guardians. I personally feel that a lot of videos are going to put Spirit Guardians in S. I am not one of those YouTubers who will do that. The fundamental flaw with Spirit Guardians is number one, it is a concentration spell, right? And when you're concentrating on a spell, you want to be away from your enemies. You don't want to be getting hit. You don't want to be the center of attention, right? So, is the damage great? Yes. Is it, can you basically hit some multiple things in one turn? Yes, just by moving around. Yes, you can do that. But the problem with it is now you're close to the enemies and you're the caster. Um, and it's great in Act 2. Act 3, not so much. But is it a B tier? Absolutely not. It's a high A tier. It's not S tier though. It's just not. Spiritual weapon. B tier. This is a really great spell. Act 1 quickly falls off. Stinking cloud. B tier. It does very similar things to like what spike growth does and whatnot. It can also poison the enemies inside, but you can't move it around like you can cloud kill. And yeah, you can't just go into it with your allies. So yeah, just not that great. Stone skin. Uh, hmm. It's very similar to bark skin, so we're just gonna put it in B tier. Sunbeam. B tier. Um, Now, if you're using this from Lathander's light, great, right? But for a level 5 or 6, I think it might even be a 6 spell, this is not great. It's just not. Uh, Comparing it to something like Chain Lightning, yikes. Yeah. Cautious Hideous Laughter, S tier. You can be using this all the way up until the end of the game. It's just a great spell. Telekinesis, potentially S tier. I put it at A tier. Because I feel like you can just honestly you can just throw people off cliffs. Um, but a lot of times you want the loot. Like you can't just cheese the boss with this. I mean you can, but then you don't get their loot. So it has its use cases, and not a lot of times you're not gonna necessarily have a useful way to use telekinesis. Now, if you had like a druid who has basically a kill zone going on, right? You could throw them in the middle of their kill zone. That would be cool. It can potentially be an S tier, but I'm gonna put it A. This is like B tier. It can be useful. Thornwhip. Same thing. You're probably not going to be using this much with a druid. There's other things you're probably going to be doing as a druid, like wild shaping, for example. Or, but Thorn Whip can be great. You could pull people into things. You can pull them off a cliff. So you could put it in A tier, but I'm not. Thunder Wave, A tier, just for the fact that you can eat people off a cliff, and for the meme. Also, you can push enemies away from you if they're all upon you, right? True Strike, trash. Vampiric Touch, B tier. It's pretty great. Vicious Mockery. Um, let's go with B tier. So this is going to be pretty great in the early levels, but quickly falls off to being useless. Yeah, yeah, I said it. It's useless later in the game. I know the bards are upset about this. I'm upset about it, but I have to be real here. Wall of Fire. Uh, this could potentially, yeah, we'll go with an A tier. It's pretty great. You can do a lot of damage with a good, well placed wall of fire. The problem is having a good opportunity to use it. Wall of ice, B tier, B tier, and B tier. Very, very situational, and none of these are as good as wall of ice. Warden of Vitality, B tier. There's better healing spells. Warding Bond. Um, if you like to cheese the game and have someone in your camp, then this is an S tier. But I'm going to assume that most of you aren't doing something like that and prefer to play the game um, in a non cheesy way. So we're just going to put it at B tier. Web. This can be pretty great. Um, yeah, we're going to put it in an A tier. Windwalk. Um, pretty good. Actually, B tier. And our very, very last spell, Witch Bolt, which is going to be in B tier. And just like that, an hour and 30 minutes later, we are finally done with this this tier maker. Uh that was a lot of spells. Some of these spells I did not even know exist. What was that one spell I didn't know exist? Uh some of them I couldn't remember what they did, but no. There was one of them I just did not even know existed for sure. I can't remember what it was. That was like an hour ago. But yeah, guys, that's gonna be it. Let me know if you guys agree. If you disagree, feel free to dislike the video. But if you did agree, drop me a like, drop me a sub. I really appreciate it. If you guys really stayed all the way to the end of this, you guys are true, true troopers, and I do appreciate it. All right, guys, check me out on my actual playthroughs of the game. I'm learning a lot. You guys can learn a lot. Um, and I think it's fairly entertaining. So, all right, guys, peace out. Catch y'all in the next one.